Calvin Rhodes went to drink coffee at a luxury restaurant, and everything after that surprised everyone. Today, I have a story that will leave you speechless. Calvin Rhodes, yes. That Calvin Rhodes, the billionaire mogul known for his quiet power and towering presence, walked into a luxury restaurant one crisp winter morning, simply looking for a cup of coffee. No entourage, no fanfare, just a man in a hoodie and jeans. But what started as a peaceful break from the spotlight quickly unraveled into a public showdown that no one saw coming. A casual insult, a viral video, and a twist so poetic it had the whole internet talking. So what exactly happened when Calvin took that sip of coffee? Stay tuned, because this wasn't just about caffeine. It was about class, character, and the kind of comeback money can't buy. The city of New York had just begun to embrace the chill of winter, with snowflakes gently floating from the pale sky landing, like tiny crystals on the sidewalks. The bustling streets of Manhattan were alive with the hum of busy pedestrians, and honking taxis amidst the organized chaos stood an upscale Café Velvet Grind located on Fifth Avenue, known for its exclusive clientele. The cafe's luxurious interior was a haven for the rich and the famous, with polished wood floors, sleek black marble, countertops and chandeliers hanging from the high ceilings, casting a soft golden light over the room. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, mixing with the delicate scent of pastries being carefully prepared in the back kitchen. Calvin Rhodes' shack dressed in a simple but undeniably stylish black hoodie. Distressed jeans and custom sneakers walked through the entrance with the kind of confidence that only someone of his stature could possess. He wasn't just a former NBA player. He was a businessman, a philanthropist, a man who had earned his place in history. Yet today, he wasn't seeking attention. He simply wanted a quiet moment to himself, a cup of coffee to go, and maybe a few minutes of peace. As he made his way to the counter, the whispers began. Heads turned, some subtly, others with barely concealed curiosity. It wasn't unusual for Calvin Rhodes to be noticed in places like this. His 7FT frame demanded attention, but he was used to it. He ignored the sidelong glances and placed his order with a casual smile, his voice deep and warm. He chose a seat by the large bay window, pulling out his phone and scrolling through the notifications. The soft clicking of coffee cups and hushed murmurs surrounded him, but it didn't disturb his calm. At a nearby table, a woman named Monica Greaves Cartwright, dressed in a designer fur coat and diamond-studded accessories, leaned in to whisper to her friends, Sophie Trent and Denise Foster. Monica Greaves's laughter was sharp, and her tone was dripping with distaste as she observed Calvin Rhodes. This place used to have standards. Monica Greaves muttered loud enough for the others to hear her gaze flickering dismissively toward the basketball star. Now look at it. Anyone can walk in here. Elena gave a quiet chuckle, shaking her head. But Denise Foster, a little more perceptive than the others, glanced nervously at Calvin Rhodes. Her eyes flitted between him and Monica Greaves, unsure whether this was the right time to voice her discomfort. Calvin Rhodes, who had been absorbed in his phone, remained oblivious to the words being exchanged. That was until Monica Greaves stood up and walked toward him. She looked down her nose at the towering man, her lips curling into a sneer. Her eyes gleamed with arrogance, a reflection of the privilege she believed she held over the world. "Maybe you should go back to Africa where you belong," she said, her voice dripping with venom. The word beer struck like a lightning bolt, and for a brief moment everything in the cafe froze. The murmurs ceased, the clinking. Silverware stopped. The world around them seemed to stop, leaving only the tense silence. Calvin Rhodes slowly sat down his coffee cup, his broad shoulders relaxed as he took off his sunglasses, placing them on the table beside him, his eyes sharp and piercing. Met Monica Greaves's with an intense but composed gaze. "What did you just say?" he asked calmly, his voice unwavering like the calm before a storm. Monica Greaves surprised that Calvin Rhodes wasn't. Reacting with anger smirked, her confidence growing. "You heard me, didn't you?" For a moment, Calvin Rhodes said nothing. He studied her, his deep-set eyes narrowing ever so slightly. He didn't feel anger. Not immediately. Instead, there was a quiet, simmering disappointment, something that weighed heavy on his chest. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had been marginalized, every person who had been told they didn't belong. The air seemed to thicken around them as everyone in the cafe waited for Calvin Rhodes's response. It was a defining moment. Calvin Rhodes could feel the tension. The whispers began again, but they were hushed. Tentative, a young man sitting at the counter who had overheard. The exchange instinctively pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled as he hit record, capturing the moment for the world to see. Shah's lips curled into a slight smile, not one of amusement, but one that spoke of the resolve that was forming inside him. He wasn't going to let this slide. This moment wasn't just going to be about what Monica Greaves said. It was about showing everyone how to handle hate with something more powerful. Action. As the young man uploaded the video to social media, the digital world began to stir. Notifications poured in, spreading like wildfire. By the time Calvin Rhodes left the cafe, the video had already gone viral. Respect, Shaq trended on Twitter, and the backlash against Monica Greaves began in earnest. The firestorm was just beginning, and the world was watching. The silence in the cafe was deafening. All eyes were on Calvin Rhodes' Shaq, waiting for him to respond to the shocking insult that had just been hurled at him. Monica Greaves stood there, her smug expression still in place, expecting some sort of emotional outburst, but instead Calvin Rhodes just stared at her, his face unreadable. There was no flash of anger, no raised voice, just an unsettling calm. For a brief moment, Monica Greaves seemed to hesitate. Her words, once confident, now sounded hollow, but she was too proud to back down. She straightened her back, her chin tilting up slightly as she awaited Shah's reaction. The air felt thick with anticipation. The other patrons, who had been pretending not to notice, were now fully focused on the interaction. Some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats, not knowing what to do, while others waited for the eruption they expected from the famous basketball player. But Calvin Rhodes was different from what they had imagined. He slowly placed his cup down, the clink of the ceramic, breaking the tension. He didn't react with the rage everyone had anticipated. Instead, his gaze never left Monica Greaves. His deep-set eyes, usually calm and friendly, were now sharp and focused. There was something in his stare that seemed to hold more power than any angry words could. "What did you just say?" Calvin Rhodes's voice was soft, but it carried an undeniable weight. His tone wasn't angry, nor was it pleading. It was firm, controlled, and yet filled with a quiet intensity. Monica Greaves's smirk never wavered, though there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes as she met his gaze. "I said, go back to Africa where you belong. What are you going to do about it?" Her voice dripped with condescension, as if she was daring him to act. Shah's lips tightened slightly, and for the first time Monica Greaves felt the power dynamic shift. She had expected him to lash out, to shout, or even to storm out. But instead, he remained in his seat, his posture relaxed, as though he was considering the weight of her words, not just as an insult to him, but as a symbol of something much larger, something that needed to be addressed. Not with anger, but with a deeper response, the cafe fell even further into silence. With all eyes fixed on the growing confrontation, a waiter who had been walking by froze in his tracks, unsure whether to intervene or to stay out of it. The sound of the espresso machine hissing in the background seemed to fade into the distance. Calvin Rhodes took a deep breath, his broad chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm. He wasn't going to let this moment pass as just another small incident. Monica Greaves's words were a spark, but he wasn't about to let it burn into something destructive. No, he had a plan, and he wasn't going to let it go to waste, instead of reacting in the way people expected, yelling, creating a scene. Shah stood up slowly, his large frame casting a shadow over the small table. He was calm, almost too calm, and that only seemed to make Monica Greaves uneasy without a word. He walked past her, his movements fluid and effortless, before turning back to face her. With the slightest of smiles, his deep voice carried across the cafe, cutting through the silence. "You know I've dealt with people like you all my life." Calvin Rhodes said his words slow but deliberate, "and every time I've always had a choice to fight back with hate or to do something bigger." Monica Greaves's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. There was a change in the air, shift that had moved from confrontation to something entirely different. Calvin Rhodes wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was in control. And then, without giving her the satisfaction of a response, Calvin Rhodes turned and walked out of the cafe. The door chiming softly behind him, the patrons remained silent, exchanging nervous glances as the weight of what had just happened sank in. The encounter had ended, but it was far from 0919. Over Monica Greaves, standing there, felt a strange mix of triumph and uncertainty. What had she really won? The young man who had recorded the entire change, his hand shaking as he uploaded the video to Twitter, watched as the first notifications came in within moments. The video had gone viral. The world was watching. The Hasher Shack began trending quickly, gathering thousands of retweets and comments. People were outraged, some at the audacity of Monica Greaves's words, others at the sheer power of Shack's calm response. Meanwhile, Monica Greaves remained oblivious to the storm that was brewing in her wake. It was until she checked her phone, noticing the flood of notifications and messages from her PR agent, that the reality hit her like a ton of bricks. Her name was everywhere, but not in the way she had imagined. Her carefully curated image, built on years of social climbing, was now in tatters. Panic set in. She frantically called her PR agent, demanding an explanation, an immediate solution. "Fix this," she snapped, pacing in her penthouse apartment. "Tell them it was taken." Out of context, "I wasn't being racist, I was just making a point." But the agent voice was firm. "There's no spinning. This Monica Greaves, the video is clear. You need to apologize." The damage was done. What she had hoped would be a harmless remark had escalated into a public scandal that she couldn't undo within hours. Her world was shifting under her feet. The world had spoken. Monica Greaves's careless words had set off a chain reaction that was beyond her control as soon as Calvin Rhodes stepped out of the cafe. The digital world came alive. The young man who had captured the moment was already watching the notifications flood his phone, his fingers trembling slightly with disbelief. Typed quickly, uploading the video to Twitter. The caption read, "Rich woman tells Calvin Rhodes wheel. Calvin Rhodes to go back to Africa. Unbelievable." Within seconds, the tweet was live and the floodgates were open. The video spread like wildfire, shared by countless users, celebrities, and activists. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. The thought of someone, especially a wealthy, privileged woman like Monica Greaves, openly mocking Calvin Rhodes, an icon, a legend, was too much for the public to handle. It wasn't long before the hashtags began trending. "Respect Calvin Rhodes," "Racist Monica Greaves," and "Shame on Monica Greaves" flooded timelines. The response was overwhelming. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, every social media platform was buzzing with outrage. Some people couldn't believe the audacity of Monica Greaves's "Everywhere Calvin Rhodes will." Calvin Rhodes was no stranger to public scrutiny. Over the years, he had faced his share of criticism, whether on the court or off. But this time was different. This wasn't just about him. It was about a deeper issue, something that had been simmering in society for far too long. And though he had no intention of letting the moment slip into bitterness, Calvin Rhodes knew that this had to be handled with care. He didn't rush to release a statement like most would have. He wasn't interested in fueling the fire. Instead, he took a step back, watching as the chaos unfolded. He knew this would be Calvin Rhodes, but he also knew that the way he responded would determine how this moment played out. Meanwhile, Monica Greaves's world was beginning to crumble. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop since the video went live. Calls from her friends, family, and business associates poured in, but it wasn't the kind of support she had hoped for. No, it was panic. Her PR team, usually quick to manage any situation, was scrambling. They had no answers. Monica Greaves stared at her phone, her eyes wide with disbelief as she read through the comments and posts. The outrage was not only aimed at her, but it was swift, furious, and unrelenting. People were calling for her to be canceled. Businesses were distancing themselves from her, and some of her most loyal followers were turning their backs. Her reputation was quickly disintegrating the brands she worked with. The social circles she had been a part of all seemed to be disappearing one by one. Invitations to elite charity events were being quietly rescinded, and business partners were pulling their support. Monica Greaves's carefully constructed image of wealth, sophistication, and exclusivity had been shattered in an instant. She tried to call her agents, but they were no help either. Fix this? Do something, she snapped. Pacing around her penthouse, her heart raced as she looked out at the New York skyline. This wasn't supposed to happen, her PR. Agent voice came over the phone, calm but firm. You need to apologize. There's no way around it. The video is everywhere, and people aren't going to let this slide. The apology needs to be genuine, but Monica Greaves wasn't listening. She could feel the walls closing in on her. I wasn't being racist. She insisted. I was just making a point. You can't let them twist this. Her agent remained silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. Monica Greaves. You don't understand. This is bigger than you think. You've offended a lot of people, including some very powerful ones. You need to come out with a real apology, not just a statement, and you need to do it soon. Monica Greaves felt her stomach drop. The realization hit her like a wave. There was no fixing this, not easily at least, and certainly not the way she was used to. The privileges she had relied on for years were slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The anger and disappointment from the public had already gained momentum. There was no turning back. While Monica Greaves's world was falling apart, Shaq's remained relatively untouched on the surface. At least the social media outrage continued, but he had remained silent. He wasn't concerned with giving interviews or making a public statement for the sake of press. He had other plans that went beyond mere words. Later that evening, a reporter caught up with Calvin Rhodes outside an event. They had expected him to be angry, to lash out, or to demand some sort of retribution. Instead, they were met with a man who had dealt with this kind of thing before. I've dealt with racism my whole life. Calvin Rhodes said, his voice calm. This isn't new, but I've got a better way to handle it. The reporters were baffled. They had expected fire and fury, but Calvin Rhodes wasn't interested in giving them that. He wasn't interested in fueling the flames of anger. Instead, he had something bigger planned. Calvin Rhodes's assistant Marcus Hill was already in the loop. The two of them had been working on a plan since the incident in the cafe. Calvin Rhodes wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't going to let Monica Greaves fade into irrelevance. No, he had a bigger vision for what this moment could become. As Marcus Hill scrolled through 1659, the news on his phone, he glanced up at Calvin Rhodes with a smirk. Man, this woman's everywhere. Looks like the mighty are falling. Calvin Rhodes raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marcus Hill turned his phone around, showing Calvin Rhodes an article about Monica Greaves's financial struggles. She's drowning in debt. That mansion she loves, it's about to be foreclosed. Her investors pulled out. The game is up. Calvin Rhodes. Calvin Rhodes leaned back in his chair, processing the information. So she's not as untouchable as she thought. Nope. Marcus Hill replied. Her empire is crumbling, and now this scandal. She's toxic. Nobody wants to be associated with her. A smile tugged at the corner of Shaw's mouth. The plan was forming in his mind. He wasn't about to destroy Monica Greaves. No, he had something far more powerful in mind, and it all started with a single bold idea. Monica Greaves's carefully constructed world was collapsing piece by piece. Her mansion, her pride and joy, was about to be sold off in a public auction, a humiliating reminder of her fall from grace. The real estate auction house, located in the heart of Beverly Hills, was buzzing with anticipation as buyers filed into the grand hall. Investors, real estate mogul, and high society figures were all present, eager to see what would become of the Langle estate. The Langle estate had long been a symbol of wealth and exclusivity, with its sprawling gardens, marble floor, and extravagant chandeliers. For years, it had hosted exclusive parties and served as a backdrop for Monica Greaves's rise to social prominence. Now it was a financial burden. She could no longer bear the mounting debt. The failed business ventures and the public scandal had left her with no options. She had tried everything to save it. But the bank had spoken, the mansion was up for auction, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As Monica Greaves sat near the front of the room, dressed in an all-black designer coat and oversized sunglasses, she tried to maintain her composure, but the reality of the situation was sinking in her hands, gripped the armrests of her chair as the Mr. Alton Riggs began the proceedings, his voice loud and clear, cutting through the tension in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now opening the bidding for the Langle estate." The Mr. Alton Riggs announced, his voice echoing through the grand hall. A one-of-a-kind luxury home located in the heart of Beverly Hills, starting bid $5 million. The room came alive with murmurs and raised paddles as investors eagerly placed their bids. Monica Greaves watched in horror as the price climbed higher and higher, each number feeling like another piece of her life, slipping away the mansion that had once been a symbol of her success. Her place at the top of the social ladder was now a commodity, to be bought and sold. $10 million. The Mr. Alton Riggs called, his gavel ringing through the room. The crowd stirred, but no one seemed willing to challenge the growing price. Monica Greaves's stomach turned as she realized how easily her former treasure was being turned into a mere transaction. This wasn't just the loss of a home, it was the loss of her identity, her status. But then the unexpected happened from the back of the room. A deep, familiar voice rang out, $20 million. A hush fell over the room as heads turned in. Surprise, Shaylo Neal, dressed in a sharp black suit and standing tall in the back corner, had just placed his bid. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Shaq's towering presence loomed over everyone, but it wasn't just his height that commanded attention. It was the sheer power of the moment. Monica Greaves's breath caught in her throat as she recognized who had entered the bidding war. The Mr. Alton Riggs quickly recovered, trying to maintain control. "We have a bid of $20 million, do I hear?" 21. The room remained still. Even the wealthiest buyers who could afford the mansion hesitated. No one wanted to challenge Calvin Rhodes. He was a living legend, a man whose wealth and influence were undeniable. A few of the other bidders exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared raise their paddle. Calvin Rhodes stood there completely at ease. His arms crossed over his chest. His expression was calm, almost amused, but there was a subtle glint in his eyes, one that told Monica Greaves this wasn't just about buying a man. It was something deeper, something far more calculated going. Once the Mr. Alton Riggs called, going twice, the gavel slammed down with a resounding bang. Sold to Mr. Calvin Rhodes, the room erupted into whispers. The crowd couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Calvin Rhodes had just bought the Monica Greaves estate, the very home that had once been the symbol of Monica Greaves's wealth and privilege. Monica Greaves, her heart pounding, sprang to her feet. She shoved past people, ignoring the murmurs around her, and stormed toward Calvin Rhodes. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, but she didn't care. Her world had just crumbled, and she was desperate to get it back. "You can't do this!" Monica Greaves's voice cracked as she approached Calvin Rhodes. "This is my home. You don't have the right to take it from me." Calvin Rhodes turned to face her, his expression unreadable. His massive frame loomed over her, and for the first time, Monica Greaves felt small, insignificant. She had spent years looking down on people like him, believing her money and status made her untouchable. Now that illusion was shattered, he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp dollar bill. He held it out to her, the paper smooth and cold in his hand. "You always look down on me." Calvin Rhodes said, his tone calm but firm. "Now you can say a black man helped you out." Monica Greaves stared at the dollar bill in shock, her mouth opening and posing as she tried to find words. But there were no words. The humiliation was too much, the cameras flashing. Around them captured the moment she realized she had lost everything for the first time in her life. Monica Greaves was the one being looked down upon. She had spent years using her wealth and privilege to belittle others, to dismiss them as beneath her. Now she was standing in front of the very man she had insulted, and he held the keys to her downfall. Calvin Rhodes didn't wait for her response. He simply turned away and walked out of the room, his presence as imposing as ever. The room remained in stunned silence, the reality of what had just happened settling over everyone like a heavy fog. As the auction continued, Monica Greaves stood there rooted to the spot, unable to move. Her hands trembled as she realized the full extent of her loss. The mansion was gone. Her reputation was gone. And worst of all, she had no one to blame but herself. Monica Greaves's world had crumbled in front of her, and now Calvin Rhodes had taken what she cherished most, her mansion, her symbol of wealth and power. But as she stewed in her humiliation, Calvin RhodesWent O'Neill was already planning something far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. The mansion wasn't just a trophy to him, it was an opportunity to create real change. The Langle estate, once a fortress of privilege, was now a symbol of what could be accomplished when people with influence used their power for something bigger than themselves. Shah's plan had already begun to take shape the moment he placed that winning bid, the Grand Estate in Beverly Hills. The place where Monica Greaves had held her exclusive charity galas was going to be transformed into something far more meaningful. A community center. Calvin Rhodes's first step was to assemble a team of professionals, contractors, architects, and local community leaders who would help him turn the estate into a place that would offer opportunity and support to those who needed it most. As he toured the mansion, walking through the grand marble halls and past the once glorious chandeliers, he could already see the potential. The ornate ballroom that had once hosted lavish parties for the wealthy elite was going to be repurposed into a mentorship and career training center for young entrepreneurs. The pristine tennis court, which had been a playground for the rich, was going to be transformed into an outdoor basketball court, open to all kids who wanted to play. The grand dining room, where Monica Greaves had hosted exclusive dinners, would become a food bank, an outreach center for struggling families in the area. Calvin Rhodes wasn't interested in simply demolishing everything. He wanted to preserve some of the history and grandeur of the estate, but make sure it served a greater purpose. He wasn't looking to make a statement of vengeance or mockery. He was driven by a vision for trans-information, a vision that would make the Langle estate a symbol of change. The work began immediately. Construction crews moved in, ripping out the high-end fixtures and replacing them with functional spaces that could serve the community. The marble countertops, once a symbol of Monica Greaves's opulence, were replaced with workstations for young adults looking to develop skills in technology, design, and business. The one stifling sense of exclusivity was being replaced by an atmosphere of possibility, collaboration, and support. While the workers buzzed around transforming the estate, Calvin Rhodes spent countless hours overseeing every detail. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was deeply involved in every aspect of the project. He reached out to local youth programs, community centers, and educational institutions, ensuring that the new center would provide real opportunities for people to grow and thrive. Calvin Rhodes didn't want this to be another charity project. It needed to be a place where young people could learn skills, access resources, and build a future. He even brought in some of his NBA friends to host basketball clinics, motivational talks, and leadership seminars for the youth in the area. The idea was simple: to provide a space where kids who had been ignored by society could find support, guidance, and inspiration. He wanted them to see that they could achieve anything, no matter their background. The transformation of the Langley State into a community center became the tour of the town. What had once been a symbol of exclusion and arrogance was now a beacon of hope for the underprivileged. As the construction continued, the anticipation built. People who had lived in the area for years, who had never been allowed to set foot inside the gates of the mansion, now found themselves looking forward to what would soon be a space that welcomed them with open arms. Monica Greaves, meanwhile, was still trying to process what had happened. Her once immaculate world had been shattered, and the loss of her mansion was only the beginning. She had spent decades crafting an image of herself as an influential socialite, someone above the rest. But now, she had nowhere to turn. The calls stopped coming. Invitations to high-end events were rescinded. Her business partnerships dissolved. She was left to watch as her former life crumbled piece by piece. The news of the Langley Estate's transformation began to spread. Social media buzzed with excitement and curiosity. People wanted to know more. They wanted to see how Calvin Rhodes was turning this story of disgrace into a story of redemption. And soon the world was watching. 1 week after the construction began, Jack made a public announcement inviting the media, local leaders, and community members to attend the grand reopening of the Monica Greaves estate. The grand unveiling would take place in just a few days, and the anticipation was palpable for Monica Greaves. It was a bittersweet moment she watched from afar, as Shaw's team worked tirelessly to complete the renovations. She had once seen the mansion as the pinnacle of her success, but now it was being transformed into a place she would never have. Imagined a space that represented everything she had tried to shut out. She didn't know if she could face it. She didn't know if she could stand there and watch as the very thing she had once owned became a symbol of hope for those she had dismissed. But the truth was undeniable. Calvin Rhodes was doing something that would leave a lasting impact on the community. The Langley Estate was no longer about wealth, status, or exclusivity. It was about giving people the tools they needed to succeed, and that in itself was a powerful statement. Calvin Rhodes didn't care about the attention. He wasn't looking for praise or accolades. He had always believed that true power came from using your influence to help others, not to belittle them. And with every change that took place in the estate, he was proving that principle to be true. The grand reopening was fast approaching. Shaq knew it would be a moment of reckoning for Monica Greaves. The mansion that had once been her kingdom was about to be reborn as something far greater. It wasn't just about turning a negative situation into something positive. It was about using his position to create a lasting legacy that would benefit the next generation for Calvin Rhodes. The work wasn't finished yet, but the foundation had been laid, and soon the world would see the full extent of what he had created, a place where dreams could flourish, no matter who you were or where you came from. The day of the grand unveiling had arrived. The sun shone brightly over Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow on the Monica Greaves estate, which had been completely transformed. What was once a symbol of exclusivity and privilege was now a beacon of hope and opportunity for the community. RhodesWent. Calvin Rhodes's vision had come to life inside the grand halls that had once hosted the most extravagant parties, and exclusive events were now lined with tables showcasing the skills of young entrepreneurs, learning the ropes of business. The ornate chandeliers, once symbols of excess, now illuminated classrooms, where aspiring students from the surrounding neighborhoods gathered to learn. The sprawling gardens, which used to be meticulously manicured and reserved for private gatherings, now featured basketball courts where kids from every walk of life could play freely. The tennis court, once the playground for the wealthy elite, had been transformed into an outdoor training ground for youth athletes with Shah's NBA friends, occasionally coming in to host clinics and motivational sessions. The transformation of the Langle estate into a community center was nothing short of remarkable. There was a buzz in the air as people gathered outside, eagerly awaiting the ribbon-cutting ceremony. News crews lined up their cameras, trained on the entrance. Capturing every moment, the media once focused on the scandal surrounding Monica Greaves and her racist remarks was now eagerly covering Calvin Rhodes's latest and perhaps most impactful move, Calvin. Rhodes stood off to the side, quietly observing the scene. His tall frame, as always, was hard to miss. But today it wasn't about his size. It was about the impact he was making, the live he was changing. He had transformed the Langle estate into something far greater than any mansion could ever be. A space where people from all walks of life could come together, learn, grow, and find support. The crowd grew larger as the ceremony time drew closer. Local families, activists, business leaders, and even celebrities had gathered to witness the official opening of the Monica Greaves Community Center. They were all curious to see how Calvin Rhodes had turned the mansion into a place of empowerment, not just for the privileged, but for those who had been denied opportunities for far too long. As Calvin Rhodes walked towards the podium, the crowd went silent. The cameras flashed, and people held their breath waiting for him to speak. He stepped up, his deep voice carrying across the crowd, steady and strong, this house. Calvin Rhodes began, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. Was once a place that shut people out, but now it's a place that welcomes them in. We all know what it's like to feel like you don't belong, to feel invisible. But the truth is, we all have the power to change that. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you've been through, or what people have told you about your worth. We all deserve a chance to succeed, to have access to opportunities, and to know that someone believes in us. The crowd erupted into applause. Calvin Rhodes continued, his words resonating with everyone who had gathered there. This isn't just about a mansion. This is about turning a moment of into something that can change the future. This place is now a community center, a mentorship space, a place where kids can learn, grow, and chase their dreams. The cameras flashed again, and the crowd cheered, their faces filled with hope and admiration. Shaq's words had struck a chord with everyone in attendance. The Langle estate was no longer a symbol of elitism. It was a symbol of unity, opportunity, and above all, change, as the ribbon was cut. A new chapter began for the Monica Greaves estate, and for the people who had once been excluded from its gates. The doors were now open, not just for the privileged few, but for everyone who had the desire to build a better life. But there was one person who wasn't part of the celebration: Monica Greaves. Monica Greaves had stayed away from the event, choosing to remain in the shadows. As the world around her continued to evolve, she had seen the pictures, read the headlines, and heard the news. The mansion, her mansion, had become a community center, a place where she had once held the highest status, now turned into a place of healing and growth for those she had once looked down on. She watched from a distance, alone in her apartment, her mind racing with disbelief and regret. She had lost everything: her wealth, her social status, her reputation, and most painfully, her son Jordan Greaves had rejected her. He had turned his back on the life she had built. For him, the life she had hoped he would one day inherit. He had chosen to work at the community center to help the people she had so often dismissed as beneath her. That was the final blow. Monica Greaves had always believed that she was the one who held the power, that her wealth and influence gave her control over everything, including her son. But now she was left with nothing, not even the respect of her own flesh and blood. She had tried to call Jordan Greaves to explain herself, but the calls went unanswered. When she had sent him a message, he had responded with a simple but cutting statement: "I don't want to be anything like you." Monica Greaves sat there, her eyes staring out the window at the bustling city. Below, the world she had once dominated had moved on without her. She was no longer relevant. no longer the person people looked up to. She had tried to climb the social ladder, but in doing so, she had alienated everyone who had ever truly cared for her. She couldn't help but feel the sting of regret, the weight of her own arrogance and prejudice. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and now she was forced to watch as Calvin Rhodes, the man she had insulted, became the hero she could never be. The event continued without her, the community center's new chapter unfolding before the eyes of the public as the day wore on. Families moved freely between the new spaces, exploring the classrooms, signing up for mentorship programs, and enjoying the newfound sense of belonging that Shaw had created. The Langle estate, once a fortress of elitism, had been reborn as a place of hope, opportunity, and unity. And in the end, that was Shaq's true victory, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been made to feel like they didn't belong. He had taken a moment of hatred and turned it into something that would last forever. A lasting legacy of change. The day had arrived. Calvin Rhodes will. Calvin Rhodes's grand transformation of the Langle estate was about to be revealed. To the world, what was once a cold, imposing symbol of wealth and exclusion was now being reshaped into a community hub, a place where hope could take root. The unveiling was set to be a momentous occasion, one that would forever change the narrative of the Monica Greaves mansion and its legacy. It had been just a few weeks since Calvin Rhodes had purchased the estate, and in that short span, the entire building had undergone a radical transformation. The once glorious marble floors were replaced with polished wood, the high-end fixtures replaced by practical functional spaces designed to serve a greater purpose. The rooms where Monica Greaves had once hosted lavish soirees were now classrooms and workspaces for young entrepreneurs. The grand ballroom, where the wealthy elite had mingled in their designer dresses and suits, had been converted into a mentorship center where local youth could receive career advice and personal development from successful business leaders. The tennis court, which had long been a playground for the rich, was now an outdoor basketball court, open to all Shaw's NBA friends, came by regularly, hosting clinics and motivational sessions for kids who dreamed of playing in the league. One day, every corner of the estate was designed to uplift, empower, and create opportunities for those who had been kept out of spaces like this for far too long. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony was electric news crews, local dignitaries, and families from the surrounding neighborhoods, all gathered outside the gates of the Monica Greaves estate, their excitement palpable. The story of Calvin Rhodes turning the mansion into a community center had captivated the public, and the media coverage had been non-stop. Every outlet was eager to see the completion of the project, the moment when the estate would officially be reborn. Jar stood at the center of it all, taking in the scene. He was dressed simply in a black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, but he was the center of attention nonetheless. He had done something far greater than anyone had expected. He had turned a personal insult into a movement. His actions had transcended revenge or retribution. They had become about something far more important, creating a lasting impact that would resonate far beyond the walls of the Langle estate. As the crowd gathered around, the media buzzed with anticipation. The press wanted sound bites, quotes from Calvin Rhodes. But today wasn't about them. It was about the people. It was about the kids who would now have a space to learn, grow, and pursue their dreams. Calvin Rhodes had kept a low profile leading up to the event, letting the work speak for itself, but now it was time to share his message. Stepping up to the podium, Calvin Rhodes looked out over the crowd. The cameras clicked and flashed, capturing every moment, but Calvin Rhodes wasn't concerned with the limelight night. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the crowd as he addressed everyone. This estate used to be a place where people, like me, were made to feel unwelcome. He began, his tone firm but compassionate. It was a place where only a select few had access to everything, where money, power, and status determined who belonged and who didn't. But that ends today. We're opening the doors of this mansion to everyone. We're turning a symbol of exclusion into a place of inclusion, a place where young people can come learn and find the opportunities they've been denied. The crowd erupted into applause, and the sound of cheers filled the air. Calvin Rhodes continued, his words resonating with everyone present today. Isn't just about a mansion. It's about creating change. It's about showing that no one is above anyone else, that no matter where you come from or what people think of you, you deserve the chance to succeed. This place isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the community. It belongs to every kid who wants to learn it, belongs to every person who needs help. This is about a future we can all build. Together, the applause grew louder. There were smiles, tears, and a renewed sense of hope in the crowd. For the first time in a long time, the Langle estate wasn't just a place of privilege and isolation, it was a symbol of opportunity and change. Calvin Rhodes's words carried weight, and they had the power to move people as he spoke. He could see the faces of the people around him, families, activists, and kids who had once been denied a chance at a better life. The Langle estate was no longer a symbol of the past. It was a beacon of what was to come. The ribbon was cut, and the doors of the Monica Greaves Community Center were opened. For the first time, the crowds flooded in, eager to explore the new spaces. They walked through the classrooms, the mentorship, the basketball courts, and the food pantry that had replaced what was once an exclusive dining room. The transformation was complete, and it was breathtaking. But as the doors of the mansion opened to the community, there was one person who wasn't there to witness it: Monica Greaves. Monica Greaves had been keeping her distance from the event. She had seen the pictures, read the headlines, and heard the stories. She had seen how Calvin Rhodes had turned the mansion into a community center, a place she had once ruled with arrogance and entitlement. Now it was a place of inclusion, a place where the very people she had once looked down on were thriving. It was too much for her to bear. Monica Greaves had once been the queen of high society, the one everyone looked up to. But now she was a pariah left to watch from the sidelines as Calvin Rhodes, whom she had insulted so cruelly, became the hero. The reality of her situation was sinking in her wealth. Her status and her social circle were gone. The Langle estate was no longer hers, and the community center was a living, breathing testament to her own failure. Her son Jordan Greaves had also rejected her, choosing to work with Calvin Rhodes at the community center. Jordan Greaves had seen through the facade she had created, and he had chosen to make a difference in the world, a world that she had tried to ignore. As the ceremony continued, Monica Greaves sat alone in her apartment, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. She had spent her life looking down on others, believing that her wealth made her superior. But now everything had changed. Shah had turned the tables, and in doing so, he had taught her a lesson she would never forget. True power doesn't come from money or status. It comes from using your influence to lift others up. The community center was officially open, and the first wave of kids, families, and local residents flooded in. They were eager to explore the new space, to sign up for programs, and to take part in the opportunities that Calvin Rhodes had created for them. The Langle estate had become a place where dreams could be built, not shattered. As Calvin Rhodes walked through the center, greeting the kids and chatting with the volunteers, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had done something that no one else had even dared to attempt. He had turned a moment of hate into something beautiful, something that would last for generations. And as the sun began to set over the transformed estate, Calvin Rhodes looked around at the faces of the people who had gathered there. They were no longer strangers to one another. They were a community bound together by the idea that everyone, no matter their background, deserved a chance. The Langle estate was no longer a monument to greed and exclusivity. It was a place of hope, of change, and of a future built on unity, while the Monica Greaves Community Center buzzed with energy and life. Monica Greaves sat in her small, sparsely decorated apartment, the weight of the world bearing down on her. The once grand halls of the Langle estate, now teeming with children and families from every walk of life, seemed like a distant memory. Her empire built on privilege and exclusion had crumbled, and she was left to witness it all from the sidelines for days after the unveiling. Monica Greaves had tried to reach out to her son, Jordan Greaves. She had sent texts, made phone calls, and even visited the Monica Greaves estate, but he had refused to respond. Her calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. He had made his choice, and it was a choice that cut deep into the very fabric of her existence. Jordan Greaves had chosen Calvin Rhodes. He had chosen the community center over his own mother. The truth stung like a sharp slap. Monica Greaves had spent her life building a world that revolved around wealth, status, and power. She had believed that as long as she had money, she could control everything, even her son. But now, standing in the ruins of her life, she saw how wrong she had been. She had looked down on people for so long, treating them as if they were beneath her, and it was her own son who had shown her just how hollow her world had become. Monica Greaves sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, waiting for a message from Jordan Greaves that would never come. The loneliness was unbearable. For the first time in years. She felt the absence of the life she had built, the empty space that her wealth and social status had once filled. Now there was only silence. Meanwhile, at the Monica Greaves Community Center, Jordan Greaves was immersed in his new life. He had joined the staff as a mentor, working with the young kids who came through the doors every day. It wasn't just a job for him. It was a purpose. It was a way for him to undo the damage his mother had done, to make things right in a world that had been shaped by prejudices and arrogance. Calvin Rhodes had taken him under his wing, showing him what it truly meant to use power for good. He had learned from Shaq how to be humble, how to listen, and most importantly, how to lift others up. He had been given a chance to help kids who had been overlooked and ignored, kids who, like him, had once felt invisible, but now they had a place to belong. They had hope. Jordan Greaves had never felt more alive. He worked tirelessly to help the kids at the center, to guide them as they navigated their futures. He helped them with their homework, coached them on the basketball court, and even assisted in organizing community events. But every time he saw a young person's life change for the better, he thought of his mother and the bitter realization that she could never be part of this world. She had chosen her path long before he had, and it was one that led her to isolation. One afternoon, as Jordan Greaves was finishing up a mentorship session with a group of young boys, he was approached by Calvin Rhodes. The towering figure walked up to him with a gentle smile, his deep voice calm and comforting. "You're doing great work here." Jordan Greaves. Calvin Rhodes said his words, carrying a sense of pride. Jordan Greaves looked up at Calvin Rhodes, grateful for his mentorship. "Thanks, Shaw, it means a lot." Calvin Rhodes paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the room before landing. "Back on Jordan Greaves, I know it's not easy what you're doing here, especially with everything that's happened with your mom, but I want you to know something. You're not alone. You've got this community, and you've got me." Jordan Greaves' heart swelled at Calvin Rhodes's words. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He had a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. He was building something meaningful, something that would last far longer than the empty mansion his mother had clung to. "I appreciate that," Jordan Greaves said quietly. "I'm just doing what I can to make up for everything." Calvin Rhodes nodded, his expression serious, yet understanding. "Don't feel like you have to make up for anything. What's done is done. But what you do now, that's what matters, and you're doing great things, man. That's all anyone can ask for." Jordan Greaves smiled, his chest swelling with gratitude. Calvin Rhodes was right. It wasn't about his past or the mistakes his mother had made. It was about the future. The future he was now helping to build one step at a time. As the weeks passed, the Monica Greaves Community Center became more than just a building. It became a movement. Kids from all over the city came to the center, eager to take part in the mentorship programs, basketball clinics, and career counseling. Volunteers from local businesses and organizations offered their time to help mentor the youth, and the center quickly became a hub for change and growth. Calvin Rhodes had turned a moment of hate into something beautiful. The mansion that had once stood as a symbol of elitism and privilege was now a symbol of upward unity and unity. And Jordan Greaves, working side by side with Calvin Rhodes, was playing a pivotal role in making that change happen. But as the community thrived, Monica Greaves's isolation deepened. She couldn't escape the weight of her actions, nor could she avoid the fact that her son had chosen a path that excluded her every time she saw the center's name in the news, every time she heard about the positive impact it was having on the community. She felt the sting of her own failure. She had failed her son. She had failed herself. One evening after another round of rejection from her son Monica, Greaves decided to visit the center. She couldn't stay away anymore. She had to see for herself what had become of the place she had once called home. She wanted to confront the reality of her situation, to understand the transformation that had taken place, even if it meant facing the truth about her own role in it. As she arrived at the gate of the Monica Greaves estate, she hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she was welcome, but with a deep breath she pushed the gates open and walked toward the front entrance. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she knew this was the only way to face what had become of her life inside. She found Jordan Greaves standing near the basketball court talking with a group of kids. She approached him slowly, her voice shaky, as she spoke his name, Jordan Greaves. He turned, his eyes widening. In surprise, for a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the past between them. But then Jordan Greaves's face softened, and he took a step toward her. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I didn't know how to talk to you. I didn't know how to fix everything." Monica Greaves's eyes filled with tears she hadn't expected. She hadn't expected him to be kind, to offer forgiveness, but there it was. In the way he spoke, in the way he reached out to her. Maybe there was a chance for redemption for both of them. The evening air was cool, but it didn't chill the warmth in Monica Greaves's heart as she stood face to face with her son, Jordan. Greaves, standing there with a calm and understanding expression, had caught her off guard. She wasn't prepared for his gentle words or the sense of reconciliation that hung in the air. All the walls Monica Greaves had built around herself, all the justifications she'd used to rationalize, her behavior suddenly seemed irrelevant the moment she had been dreading for so long. Facing her son was now a moment of healing. "I didn't know how to fix everything." Jordan Greaves continued, his voice quieter. "Now I was angry. I thought you would change, but I didn't know how to get through to you. But now I see that you're trying, and that's enough for me." Monica Greaves felt her heart twist at his words. She had spent years building her world on the idea that money and status were everything, that they could solve every problem, fix every broken relationship. But now, standing before her son, she saw how wrong she had been. The life she had worked so hard to build based on exclusion, arrogance, and superiority had only driven him away. "I was wrong," Monica Greaves said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've spent my life pushing people away. I never realized what I was doing until it was too late." Jordan Greaves's face softened, and for the first time in what felt like years, Monica Greaves saw a glimpse of the son she had lost, the boy she had raised. The one who had once looked up to her was still there beneath the layers of hurt and disappointment. "Mom, I don't know what's going to happen from here on out, but I'm here for you, Jordan." Greaves said, his voice steady. "If you're willing to work on it, we can start rebuilding together." Monica Greaves's eyes welled up with tears. It wasn't an easy offer. She knew that they couldn't erase the years of hurt and neglect in a single conversation. But in that moment, something shifted. She felt the weight of her past actions, her cruelty, her obsession with status, her refusal to see the humanity in others. But she also felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, She realized that change was still possible, and perhaps she could start anew. I'll try, Jordan Greaves. I'll try to be a better person. I won't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to be better for you for everyone. Monica Greaves said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan Greaves nodded, a small but genuine smile spreading across his face. That's all I asked. The next few weeks saw Monica Greaves's world shift in ways she hadn't anticipated. After her conversation with Jordan Greaves, she found herself returning to the Monica Greaves Community Center, this time not as a bystander, but as someone who wanted to make amends, to offer something of herself to the community that Calvin Rhodes had built. She began attending meetings, volunteering her time to help. With the Sense programs, it wasn't easy. At first, she had to confront her own prejudices and the discomfort of stepping into a world she had once dismissed. But with every day that passed, she began to understand the value of what was happening at the center. She saw firsthand how it was changing lives, providing opportunities, and helping young people from all walks of life achieve their dreams. It was a far cry from the elitism and exclusion she had once championed. She didn't expect people to forgive her immediately, nor did she expect a warm reception. She had alienated so many people over the years, and she knew that rebuilding trust would take time. But what mattered was that she was trying. She was putting in the effort to change, and that was a step in the right direction. The community members at the center, many of whom had been victims of the kind of elitism Monica Greaves had once embodied, were initially wary of her. But over time, they saw that she was sincere in her efforts. She helped with organizing events, donated supplies for the youth programs, and even began working directly with the kids, helping them with resumes and career advice. She was starting from the ground up, just like they were. It was humbling, but it was also liberating. Calvin Rhodes watched from the sidelines as Monica Greaves slowly but surely began to immerse herself in the work of the center. He didn't rush to congratulate her or offer his approval. He understood that redemption wasn't about receiving praise, it was about consistency and a genuine willingness to change. Calvin Rhodes knew that Monica Greaves had a long way to go, but he also saw the small but significant progress she was making. "I'm proud of you," Calvin Rhodes said to Monica Greaves one afternoon as they stood together outside the community center, watching a group of kids practice basketball. "You're doing the work, you're showing up, and that matters." Monica Greaves, her hands in her pockets, looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. "It's hard." "Calvin Rhodes," she admitted, her voice carrying the weight of the journey she was on. "But it's worth it. I never realized how much I was missing." Calvin Rhodes smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's the thing about change. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it in the end, over time." Monica Greaves began to find her place in the community center. She wasn't just a donor or a volunteer. She became a mentor, guiding the young women who came through the doors, offering advice and teaching them the lessons she had learned the hard way. Her own experiences of loss and rebuilding were now her greatest assets, and she shared them openly with anyone who was willing to listen. But more than anything, Monica Greaves found herself rediscovering a sense of purpose that had eluded her for years. The community she had once rejected now embraced her, not because of her wealth, but because of her willingness to change and to help others. And in that process, she had found something more meaningful than any mansion or luxury could ever offer: true connection. Jordan Greaves, too, began to see a change in his mother. It wasn't a complete transformation, and they still had much to work through, but they were finally on the path to healing their relationship, once fractured. Beyond Repair was now slowly mending, one conversation at a time. As the months passed, the Monica Greaves Community Center flourished. The children who once wandered the streets now had a safe space to learn, grow, and play. Monica Greaves's journey from a symbol of privilege and exclusion to a mentor and advocate for change had become a testament to the power of redemption, and in the heart of that community, Calvin Rhodes' will. Calvin Rhodes's vision continued to thrive, a vision that had turned a moment of hate into something beautiful. It was more than just a building. It was a place where people could find hope, where new beginnings were possible, and where change was not only welcomed but embraced. Monica Greaves, once a woman who had looked down on others, was now lifting them up one day, one person at a time. As the months passed, the Monica Greaves Community Center became a place of profound transformation, not only for the youth it served, but for those who had once been part of the world of privilege that Calvin Rhodes had worked so hard to dismantle. Monica Greaves's journey was just one of many, many stories that unfolded within the Cent's walls. The mansion that had once stood as a monument to exclusion now stood as a beacon of inclusion, a symbol of what could be accomplished when people put their differences aside and work towards something greater than themselves. Monica Greaves's role in the community center continued to evolve. She wasn't just a mentor anymore. She had become a leader, one who was respected by the very people she had once looked down upon. She had worked hard to gain their trust, and while it hadn't been easy, she was now an integral part of the center's success. Her transformation had been slow but steady, each small step forward, serving as a reminder of how much she had changed, and every day she worked harder to earn the forgiveness of the people she had once wronged. Her relationship with Jordan Greaves, too, was evolving. There were still moments of tension, still conversations that were difficult to have, but the cracks in their bond had started to heal. They spoke openly now about the past, about their hurt, and about their shared future. Jordan Greaves had learned to see the change in his mother. He saw the way she interacted with the kids at the center, how her words once cold and dismissive were now full of empathy and support. He saw how she had come to value humility over status service, over indulgence. "I am proud of you, Mom," Jordan Greaves said one evening as they sat together after a long day at the center. The walls, once cold and distant between them, now felt warmer, more open. "You've really turned things around, Monica." Greaves smiled. But there was a depth to her expression that went beyond just pride. It was gratitude. Gratitude for her son, for the opportunity to make things right, and for the community that had welcomed her with open arms. Despite her past, she had spent so long building walls around herself, thinking they would protect her. But in truth, it was the people around her who had helped her tear them down. "I didn't know it was possible to change this much, Jordan Greaves," she admitted softly. "But I guess it's never too late, right?" Jordan Greaves nodded. "No, it's never too late." Calvin Rhodes, who had watched the entire process unfold from the sidelines, could see the growth in both Monica Greaves and Jordan Greaves. He had seen how the community had embraced them, how they had both learned the value of humility, and how they had come to understand that true power came not from wealth or status, but from the ability to help others. "I told you it would be worth it," Calvin Rhodes said to Monica Greaves one afternoon as they stood together outside the center watching the kids play basketball. "Change doesn't happen overnight, but you've shown everyone here that it's possible, and that to me is the real victory." Monica Greaves looked at Calvin Rhodes, her eyes filled with a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you. Calvin Rhodes, you didn't just buy a mansion you gave us, saw a chance to build something real, something that actually matters." Calvin Rhodes chuckled, his deep voice filled with warmth. "I didn't do it alone. You showed up. You put in the work. That's what matters." The Monica Greaves Community Center had become a model for other communities. As word of its success spread, more and more people from around the city began to take notice. Local leaders and philanthropists reached out, eager to see what they could do to replicate Shah's vision in their own neighborhoods. The center hosted regular workshop shops, bringing in experts from various fields to offer advice and mentorship to the young people in the area. Volunteers came from all walks of life, teachers, business owners, and professionals who wanted to give back. There was a palpable sense of hope in the air as people began to see that change was not only possible, but that it could start with them. Monica Greaves had become more than just a mentor. She had become a champion for the community. She organized fundraisers, volunteered her time to speak at local schools, and advocated for better opportunities for the kids at the center. She had come full circle, no longer the woman who had been blind to the struggles of others, but someone who was now actively working to create a better future for those who had been overlooked for so long one day after a particularly successful charity event. Monica Greaves stood at the edge of the basketball court watching the kids run around, their laughter filling the air. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the center, and for the first time in years, Monica Greaves felt at peace. She had built something far more valuable than a mansion. She had helped build a future where kids from every background could come together, work toward their dreams, and find support along the way. The Langle estate had been reborn, not just as a community center, but as a symbol of change, unity, and redemption, as the center continued to flourish. The seeds of change planted by Calvin Rhodes began to grow in ways no one could have predicted. More children were enrolling in the mentorship programs, more families were finding support, and more lives were being transformed. It wasn't just about basketball or academics anymore. It was about hope. About showing the world that every person, no matter where they came from, had the potential to make a difference. Jordan Greaves had found his purpose. Monica Greaves had found hers, and the community had found a sense of belonging that was once denied to them. The journey wasn't over. There was still much work to be done, but the foundation had been laid. Schick's vision for the Monica Greaves Community Center had proven that change was possible. And with every passing day, it was becoming more than just a dream. It was becoming a legacy. And in the quiet moments, as Monica Greaves watched the kids at the center, she knew that she had finally found something that could never be taken away. A sense of purpose and a place where she truly belonged. The Monica Greaves Community Center was no longer just a building. It had become a living, breathing testament to the power of transformation. The once grand mansion that had been a symbol of privilege and exclusion was now a beacon of hope, a place where children of all backgrounds came to find guidance, mentorship, and the tools they needed to build a better future. And at the heart of it all were the people who had made it possible: Calvin Rhodes, Monica Greaves, and Jordan Greaves. Monica Greaves. Monica Greaves had come a long way from the woman who had once looked down on others. She had found her calling in the center not as a former socialite or privileged figure, but as a mentor, someone who had lived through the mistakes of her past and was now using her experiences to help others. She had taken on a new role within the center, not just as a volunteer, but as an advocate for systemic change. She worked tirelessly to ensure that every child who walked through the doors had access to the resources they needed to succeed, whether it was academic support, career guidance, or emotional support. Jordan Greaves had been with the center from the very beginning, and in many ways, it had shaped his future. He had found his purpose in helping others, in seeing the potential in the young people around him, and doing everything he could to help them realize that potential. He had always wanted to make his mother proud, but now he realized that he could take pride in his own journey, one where he was learning to create a lasting impact in his community, just like Calvin Rhodes had done. Calvin Rhodes, of course, remained a guiding force in the background. His influence had sparked the change, but he wasn't interested in the accolades for him. The center's success was its own reward. He had given people the opportunity to succeed, and that was all that mattered. His visits to the center were frequent, but he never sought the spotlight. He was there for one reason: to see the work continue. He had accomplished what he set out to do, but he knew that the true work would be done by the community, not by him alone. One afternoon, after a particularly busy day at the center, Monica Greaves stood outside looking up at the Y. Langley estate. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the building, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. She had once looked at this mansion and seen only the trappings of wealth, the mark of social status. But now she saw it for what it truly was: a place where change could happen, a place where people could come together, leave their pasts behind, and build something better. Jordan Greaves came up behind her and stood silently for a moment, taking in the view with her. They had grown closer over the past year, and though there were still many conversations to be had, they had come to understand each other in ways they never had before they had both changed, and that Jordan Greaves realized was the true victory mom. Jordan Greaves said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done here. You've helped so many people, and you've helped me more than you know." Monica Greaves turned to him, a gentle smile on her face. "I'm the one who should be thanking you, Jordan Greaves, if it wasn't for you. I would never have found this path. I'd still be lost in my own world, thinking that money and status were everything. But now I see that it's the people around us who matter. It's the lives we touch that make us who we are." Jordan Greaves nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had always wanted to make a difference, to be a part of something greater than himself, but now he saw how much that difference had come full circle, not just for the kids at the center, but for his own family. He had helped his mother read, discover herself, and together they were building a legacy that would last. The Monica Greaves Community Center continued to grow as its reputation spread. More people came to volunteer, more businesses offered support, and more families sought out the resources the center provided. What had started as an idea, a way to give back, to turn a moment of hate into something beautiful, had blossomed into a thriving community hub. Shaw's original vision had been realized in ways that exceeded anyone's expectations. The center wasn't just about basketball or academics. It was about building relationships, empowering people, and showing them that change was possible. The kids who once played on the courts now had jobs, scholarships, and the skills they needed to succeed in the world. The mentorship programs had helped countless individuals find careers they never thought possible, and the food pantry had provided nourishment to families who had once been struggling to make meat. Monica Greaves, Jordan Greaves, and Calvin Rhodes were no longer just figures within the center. They had become the embodiment of what it meant to overcome adversity, to rise above the past, and to create something lasting for future generations. They had each found a new purpose, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would live on for years to come. And as the sun set over the Langle estate, casting a warm glow over the community that had grown inside its walls, Monica Greaves finally understood what it meant to belong. It wasn't about status or wealth. It wasn't about the mansion, the clothes, or the parties. It was about the people you helped, the lives you touched, and the change you created. The Langley estate was no longer a symbol of exclusion. It was a symbol of hope, of redemption, and of the possibility for change. And for the first time in a long time, Monica Greaves felt truly at peace, knowing that she had helped build something that would change lives for generations to come. And maybe that's the real power. Not money, not fame, but the ability to rise above hate and choose grace instead. Calvin Rhodes didn't clap back with rage. He didn't flex his status. He taught the world that dignity can speak louder than revenge, and that real change begins not with punishment, but with purpose. But what do you think? Should Calvin have done more to call her out publicly? Or was his quiet strength the most powerful response of all? Is cancel culture healing, or just another form of hate? If this story moved you, tap that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. And don't forget to subscribe to Soulful Stories I Fool for more tales that touch the heart and stir the soul. You never know. The next story might just change the way you see the world.